Captain Derek Miller didn't see a person standing in front of his $20 million F-22 Raptor. He saw an obstacle, a smudge of grease in a flight suit that was 2 sizes too big. He saw a level 1 mechanic, the bottom of the Air Force food chain, daring to hold up his takeoff. "I said pull the chocks, grease monkey," Miller barked, his voice amplified by the flight helmet, echoing across the tarmac like a thunderclap. Sam didn't flinch. She didn't look down at her boots, and she didn't apologize. She stood with a stillness that didn't belong on a busy flight line. It was the stillness of a sniper waiting for the wind to die down. "Negative, Captain," Sam said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the whine of the auxiliary power unit like a diamond cutter. "This bird is grounded. You have a harmonic vibration in the left strut. You take off, you lose the gear. You lose the gear, you lose the jet." Miller laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "I have a 3-star general inbound in 10 minutes, and I am his escort. You think I'm going to let a girl who changes oil filters ground the most advanced fighter on the planet because she feels a vibration? Move, or I will have you court-martialed before lunch." Sam looked up. For a second, the mask slipped. The tired, overworked mechanic vanished. In her place was something ancient and dangerous, something that had seen more combat in a week than Miller had seen in his entire career. "You can court-martial me, Captain," she said, locking eyes with him through his visor. "But you're not flying this plane with General Sterling on your wing. Kill yourself if you want. You don't get to kill him." Nellis Air Force Base. A kingdom of aluminum, jet fuel, and ego. To the outside world, it was the tip of the spear, the home of the elite. But inside the wire, it was a caste system. At the top were the pilots, the gods of the sky who walked with a swagger that said they owned the air they breathed. At the bottom were the maintainers, the knuckle-draggers, the invisible hands that kept the gods aloft. And then there was Sam. On the payroll, she was Samantha Vance, 24 years old, civilian contractor, level 1 maintenance. Her job description was simple: check fluids, kick tires, and stay out of the way. She was invisible, a ghost in blue coveralls. She spent her days scrubbing hydraulic fluid off concrete, and her nights reading technical manuals in a cramped off-base apartment. To the other mechanics, she was a quiet workhorse, a girl who knew her way around a wrench but lacked ambition. They didn't know why she flinched when doors slammed too hard. They didn't know why she scanned the perimeter of the mess hall before sitting down. And they certainly didn't know why her hands, scarred and stained with oil, had the calloused precision of a concert pianist or a bomb disposal expert. They didn't know that Samantha Vance was a construct, a shell. Beneath the grease and the baggy uniform lived Warrant Officer Kincaid, retired, Special Operations Aviation Regiment, a woman who had hung out of helicopters in valleys so deep the GPS couldn't find them. She had fixed rotors under enemy fire while hot brass rained down her collar. She had held dying men and kept birds in the air with duct tape and prayers. She had left that life. She had buried the dog tags and the memories. She wanted the quiet. She wanted the simple binary of a machine, broken or fixed. No politics, no life or death decisions, just nuts and bolts. But war has a way of finding you, even when you're hiding under the wing of a fighter jet in the Nevada desert. And today, war had arrived in the form of General Marcus Sterling. General Marcus Sterling was a legend, the kind of man whose reputation entered the room 5 minutes before he did. He wasn't just brass, he was iron. He had survived the impossible, including a recent assassination attempt that had left half his detail in the morgue. He was a man who knew the cost of freedom because he had paid it in blood. He was here for a classified summit, a meeting that could shift the geopolitical balance of half the globe. The security was tighter than a drum. Secret Service, MPS, K-9 units sweeping every inch of the tarmac. The air crackled with tension. Escorting him to the summit was Captain Derek Miller, call sign Wraith. Miller was the poster boy for the Air Force. Jawline like a granite cliff, eyes like ice, and an ego the size of the hangar. He was the best, and he made sure everyone knew it. He treated his aircraft like a throne, and his ground crew like serfs. Sam was assigned to the pre-flight check of Miller's Raptor. It was routine. A kick the tires and light the fires job. The bird had just come out of a phase inspection. It was supposed to be perfect. She moved around the aircraft with a fluid, rhythmic grace. Most mechanics looked at the plane. Sam listened to it. She ran her hands along the fuselage like she was reading Braille. She checked the control surfaces, the intake, the landing gear. Everything was green on the diagnostic pad. The computer said the plane was flawless. The flight chief said it was ready. Miller was already doing his walk-around, checking his watch, impatient to get in the air and show off for the general. But then, Sam stopped. She was down by the left main landing gear strut. She paused, her hand resting on the hydraulic actuator. She closed her eyes. The wind howled across the runway. Engines roared in the distance. But Sam tuned it all out. She focused on her fingertips. There was a hum, a frequency. It was so faint, a machine wouldn't pick it up unless it was calibrated for it. It was a harmonic dissonance. To a normal mechanic, it was just the plane settling. To Sam, it was a scream. It was the sound of metal crying out before it snapped. Sam didn't trust computers. Computers only knew what they were told. They didn't know the feel of metal fatigue. They didn't know that a microscopic fracture in a titanium alloy sings a specific song when it's under pressure. She traced the strut. There, a hairline scratch on the piston, invisible to the naked eye. But under the paint, deep in the grain of the metal, the structure was compromised. She did the math in her head instantly. The F-22 weighs roughly 43,000 pounds empty. Add fuel, munitions, and the G-force of a combat takeoff. The moment Miller pulled back on the stick, the weight would transfer to the rear gear. That piston would take the load. If it held, fine. If it snapped, the gear would collapse. The wing would hit the tarmac at 160 knots. The fuel tank inside the wing would rupture. The spark from the titanium scraping the concrete would ignite the JP-8 fuel. It wouldn't be a crash. It would be a fireball. And right next to it, on the taxiway, would be General Sterling's transport plane. Sam felt the cold knot in her stomach. The code of the mechanic is simple. If there is doubt, there is no flight. She pulled a red tag from her vest, a do not operate tag. She wired it to the nose gear. "What do you think you're doing?" The voice came from above. Captain Miller was standing on the ladder, helmet under his arm, looking down at her like she had just spit on his boots. "Grounding the aircraft, sir," Sam said, standing up and wiping her hands on a rag. She didn't salute. Civilians don't salute. But she stood at a modified parade rest, a habit she couldn't break. "Grounding it?" Miller scoffed, hopping down the ladder. He towered over her. "On whose authority?" "Mine," Sam said calmly. "You have a structural anomaly in the left main gear. It feels like a stress fracture in the actuator piston. Miller looked at the gear, then at Sam. He laughed, shaking his head. It feels like a fracture? Did you run a dye penetrant test? Did you x-ray it? No time, sir, but I can feel the resonance. Resonance, Miller repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Listen to me, little lady. This jet just cleared a phase inspection yesterday. The best engineers on this base signed it off. The computer says it's green. And you, a level 1 grease monkey, think you can feel something the sensors missed? Sensors don't have gut instincts, Captain. The metal is bad. Remove the tag, Miller ordered. His face hardened. General Sterling is wheels down in 5 minutes. I am not delaying this mission because you have a bad feeling. I can't do that, sir. The silence on the tarmac was heavy. Other mechanics had stopped working. They watched from a distance, eyes wide. Nobody said no to Captain Miller. Certainly not a female contractor who looked like she should be in a college library. Miller stepped closer, invading her personal space. It was an intimidation tactic. He expected her to shrink, to apologize, to scurry away. Let me be clear, Miller hissed. You are a contractor. You are expendable. I can have your clearance revoked and you escorted off this base in 10 minutes. You are jeopardizing a national security mission. Now for the last time, take the tag off. Sam looked at the tag. It was a flimsy piece of cardboard and wire. But in her world, it was a shield. It was the line between life and death. If you fly, Sam said, her voice dropping an octave, losing the civilian softness. The left strut will shear upon rotation. You'll cartwheel into the general's transport. You won't just kill yourself, Captain. You'll kill the VIP. You're delusional. Miller turned to his flight chief, a burly master sergeant named Henderson. Chief, get this woman away from my aircraft and cut this tag. Henderson looked at Sam. He liked her. She was quiet, did her job. But Miller was an officer. Sam, Henderson said gently, come on. If the diagnostics are green. Chief, put your hand on the strut, Sam pleaded, breaking protocol. Just feel it. I don't have time for a seance, Miller shouted. He reached for the red tag himself. He ripped it off the gear, the wire snapping with a sharp ping. He crumpled it and threw it at Sam's feet. Get her out of here, Miller ordered. He turned and started climbing the ladder. Ground crew, prepare for engine start. Sam stood there, looking at the crumpled red tag. The wind blew it across the tarmac. She had done her duty. She had warned him. The civilian part of her brain said, walk away. You tried. It's his funeral. But the warrant officer didn't walk away. The warrant officer knew that regulations were written in blood, and you didn't let an arrogant officer kill good men just because he had shiny bars on his shoulders. Sam didn't move toward the hangar. She moved toward the nose wheel. Miller was strapping in when he saw the ground crew hesitating. They were looking at the front of the jet. He looked through the HUD. Sam was standing directly in front of the nose gear. She wasn't moving. She was blocking the taxi path. What is she doing? Miller keyed the comms. Tower, this is Wraith 1. I have a personnel issue on the hard stand. Request security forces immediately. Copy, Wraith 1. Security is en route. The tower crackled. Miller opened the canopy. The whine of the APU was deafening. Move, or I will run you over, he screamed. Sam didn't budge. She crossed her arms. Her stance had changed again. Feet shoulder-width apart, knees slightly bent, center of gravity low. It wasn't a posture of defiance. It was a posture of combat readiness. She looked up at the cockpit and tapped her ear. Cut the engine. Miller was apoplectic. He revved the engine, the jet lurching forward against the chocks. The noise was a physical blow. He wanted to scare her. He wanted her to run. But Sam had stood on flight lines where mortars were walking in. A jet engine didn't scare her. She stared him down, her face a mask of stone. Then the black SUVs arrived. The motorcade swept onto the tarmac and screeched to a halt. Doors flew open. Security details swarmed out, weapons raised. And from the center vehicle stepped General Marcus Sterling. He didn't look at the plane. He looked at the scene. A multi-million-dollar fighter jet, a screaming pilot, and a lone girl in grease-stained coveralls blocking the path. Sterling walked forward, his personal detail trying to keep up. He signaled for Miller to cut the engine. The whine died down, leaving only the sound of the wind. "What?" Sterling asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Is the meaning of this circus?" Miller scrambled down the ladder, his face red with rage. "General, my apologies. This contractor has lost her mind. She's refusing to clear the aircraft. I've called security. We'll have her removed instantly." Sterling looked at Sam. He saw the grease, the baggy uniform, the red tag on the ground. "Is that so?" Sterling asked. He walked up to Sam. He was a big man, imposing. "You're holding up a classified mission, young lady. You better have a damn good reason why you're not in handcuffs right now." Sam snapped to attention. It was involuntary. Her spine straightened, her chin tucked. "Sir," she said, "this aircraft is not airworthy. Left main gear strut has a stress fracture." Captain Miller refused to acknowledge the warning. Miller interjected. "General, the diagnostics are clean. She's hallucinating. She claims she can feel it." Sterling looked at Sam. He studied her eyes. He had seen that look before. The 1,000-yard stare. The look of someone who knows something terrible is about to happen and is the only one who can stop it. "You're a mechanic?" Sterling asked. "Level 1, sir." "And you think you know more than the flight computer and the captain?" "I know what I feel, sir. The harmonic resonance is off. It's a B-flat hum. It should be a C-sharp. The metal is singing the wrong note." Sterling paused. A B-flat hum. He remembered a helicopter pilot in Kandahar saying something similar right before a tail rotor disintegrated. He looked at Miller. "Captain, did you check it?" "General, we don't have time to strip the gear. We are on a strict timeline." Sterling looked back at Sam. "What's your name, son?" "Excuse me, miss." "Vance, sir. Samantha Vance." Sterling narrowed his eyes. Vance. The name meant nothing. But the posture, the way she held her hands, thumbs along the seam of her trousers, that wasn't civilian training. "If you're wrong, Vance," Sterling said, leaning in, "you will never work on a government contract again. You will be blacklisted. You might even face charges for sabotage. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," Sam said without hesitation. "But if I'm right, you get to go home to your family tonight." The silence stretched. Sterling was a gambling man, but he only bet on sure things. He looked at the pilot, full of bluster and pride. He looked at the mechanic, quiet, resolved, terrified but standing her ground. "Check it," Sterling ordered. "General?" Miller gasped. "I said check it," Sterling roared. "Get the NDI kit." The NDI team worked fast. They stripped the paint on the strut. They sprayed the fluorescent penetrant. They waited. Miller paced back and forth, checking his watch, glaring at Sam. Sam stood still, watching the gear. The lead inspector shined the UV light on the strut. He gasped. "General," the inspector called out. His voice was shaky. "You need to see this." Sterling and Miller walked over. Under the black light, a bright green line glowed across the actuator piston. It wasn't just a fracture. It was a canyon. "My God," Miller whispered. "How did the sensors miss that?" "It's not a fatigue fracture," the inspector said, looking closer. He wiped the area. "Look at the edges. They're serrated, and there's residue." He smelled the rag. Acid. The air left the group. This wasn't wear and tear. "Someone etched this," the inspector said, looking up, fear in his eyes. "Someone chemically weakened the strut. They painted over it to hide the work. This was sabotage." Sterling went cold. This was an assassination attempt. If Miller had taken off, the gear would have collapsed on rotation, right as they passed Sterling's plane. The explosion would have taken them all out. Miller looked at Sam. The arrogance was gone, replaced by shock. How did you know?" Sam didn't answer. She was looking at the perimeter fence. Her internal alarm bells were ringing. Sabotage meant a saboteur. And if the plane didn't crash, Plan B was usually much louder. "General," Sam said, her voice dropping to a command tone. "Get your detail to cover. Now." "What?" Sterling asked. "This was a timed hit," Sam said, scanning the horizon. "If the plane doesn't go up, they'll go to a contingency." As if on cue, a glint of light flashed from the distant ridgeline outside the base. A sniper scope. "Down!" Sam screamed. She didn't move like a mechanic. She moved like a blur. She tackled General Sterling, driving him into the concrete behind the landing gear of the Raptor, just as a round cracked the air where his head had been. Crack thump. The sound of a high-caliber rifle echoed across the tarmac. Panic erupted. Security detail scrambled, but they were exposed. "Sniper! North Ridge!" Sam yelled, pointing. Miller was frozen, standing in the open. "Get down, you idiot!" Sam grabbed the pilot by his harness and dragged him into cover behind the wheel. "They're pinned down," Sam realized, looking at the Secret Service agents taking fire. The sniper had the angle. They needed cover, but the cars were too far. Sam looked up at the Raptor. The engine was off, but the auxiliary power unit was still spinning down. "Captain, give me your sidearm," Sam ordered. "What?" "No," Miller stammered. Sam didn't ask twice. She reached into his holster, disarmed him with a fluid twist, and checked the chamber. "Stay low." She popped up from behind the wheel. She wasn't shooting at the sniper. He was a mile away. She was shooting at the manual release lever for the Raptor's external fuel tank on the opposite wing. Bang. Bang. 2 shots. The release mechanism shattered. The heavy fuel tank dropped from the wing onto the tarmac with a massive clang, rolling slightly. "Move," Sam commanded the security detail. "Use the tank as cover." The agents scrambled behind the massive aluminum tank, giving them a solid wall of metal between them and the ridge. It broke the sniper's line of sight. Sirens wailed. Base Quick Reaction Force, QRF, vehicles roared onto the tarmac, heavy machine guns engaging the ridgeline. The threat was suppressed. Sam sat with her back against the landing gear, the pistol resting on her knee. She took a deep breath, her hands shaking slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. General Sterling sat up, brushing dirt off his uniform. He looked at the fuel tank, then at the sniper's position, and finally at the young woman holding a Beretta like she was born with it. He looked at the tattoo revealed on her forearm where the sleeve had torn. A winged dagger. The insignia of the 161st SOAR. "Warrant officer," Sterling said softly. Sam looked at him. The game was up. "Retired, sir." The sun was setting over the base. The sniper team had been neutralized. The base was on lockdown. Captain Miller stood by the hangar doors. He looked smaller, stripped of his ego. He watched as General Sterling spoke to the grease monkey. Sterling handed Sam a challenge coin. He didn't offer her a job. He didn't offer her a medal. He knew she didn't want them. "You saved a lot of lives today, Kincaid," Sterling said. "Miller is a good pilot, but he's blind. You see everything." "Just doing the job, General," Sam said, pocketing the coin. "Just checking the fluids." Sterling smiled. "If you ever get tired of checking fluids, I have a use for people who can hear the metal sing." "I'm good here, sir. I like the quiet." Sterling nodded. He walked away, stopping by Miller. He put a hand on the captain's shoulder. "Learn from her, Captain. You fly the plane. She knows the plane. There's a difference." Sam watched them leave. She picked up a rag, wiped the grease from her face, and walked back into the hangar. She was just a level 1 mechanic again. Invisible. But as she walked into the shadows, she tapped the side of the Raptor. "You're welcome," she whispered. That's the story of the mechanic who grounded a general to save him. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the flight line. And tell us in the comments, would you have stood your ground against a captain? See you in the next one.